6 months after the first battle, the last Devourer Harvester ship was destroyed in the outer reaches of space near the Andromeda approach corridor. The indomitable Will hung motionless above the wreckage, its dark hull scarred by countless battles but still intact, its crew exhausted but victorious. The victory had come at a terrible price. 17 Council worlds had been consumed before the Devourer fleet was finally stopped. Billions of lives had been lost because the galaxy's leaders had refused to listen to humanity's warnings. But without human intervention, the death toll would have been measured in trillions. The war had lasted 6 months, but it had felt like 6 years to those who fought it. Battle after battle, system after system, the indomitable Will had stood alone against an enemy that should have been unstoppable. Other ships had joined the fight as the war progressed, hastily built vessels from Council worlds that had finally understood the threat they faced. But it was humanity that had shown the way. In the rebuilt Council chambers aboard Harmony's Edge, a very different meeting was taking place. Speaker Veltari, her usual arrogance replaced by hard-won wisdom, addressed the assembled representatives with words that would change galactic politics forever. The human defense force has shown capabilities that exceed our combined technological achievements, she announced to the packed chamber. More importantly, they have taught us something we had forgotten during our centuries of peace. Survival requires constant vigilance, careful preparation, and the courage to face uncomfortable truths. Admiral Minho stood before the Council not as a human seeking permission to be heard, but as Earth's representative to a galaxy that had learned to respect humanity's children. Behind him, holographic displays showed the construction yards orbiting Earth's moon, where humans were building a fleet that would ensure the Devourer threat could never again catch the galaxy unprepared. The question before us, Minho addressed the assembled delegates, is not whether humanity deserves a voice in galactic affairs. We have already proven our worth. The question is whether this council is ready to grow. Beyond the complacency that almost led to all our extinctions, the changes were already beginning. Dr. Yanhee presented her final report on Devourer technology to the combined scientific community of dozens of worlds. The mechanical remains revealed disturbing truths that no one wanted to face. What they had fought was merely a scouting force. Somewhere in the dark spaces between galaxies, greater threats were waiting. But humanity was already preparing for those threats too. President Yuna stood before the Global Defense Initiative's new headquarters on Earth, watching as volunteers from dozens of species joined human crews aboard the expanding fleet. The galaxy had learned that Earth's children possessed something precious and rare, the complete inability to accept defeat. We stand at a crossroads, Yuna told the mixed crowd of humans and aliens. We can return to the old ways of comfortable ignorance, or we can build something new. A galaxy that is ready for whatever the universe throws at us. Commander Jiwan, now serving as humanity's main liaison to Council intelligence, submitted her analysis of the crisis to the historical archives. The Devourers represented an existential threat that required an unprecedented response. Humanity provided that response not through superior numbers or ancient wisdom, but through the application of focused innovation and strategic thinking. Most importantly, they refused to accept extinction as inevitable. The months following the victory were filled with change. New alliances formed between species that had barely spoken to each other before the war. New technologies emerged from the combination of human innovation and alien knowledge. New preparations began for the threats that lurked in the darkness between stars. The hegemony, whose proud fleets had been destroyed in the first battles, swallowed their pride and asked humans to help them rebuild. The Etherians, who had considered themselves the most advanced species in the galaxy, sent their best students to learn from human engineers. The Zephyrians opened their atmospheric cities to human families, offering them homes among the clouds. But everyone would remember the day when humanity's warship had arrived and the galaxy had discovered fundamental truths about survival. Chief Engineer Kyung-soo, now promoted to Director of Advanced Weapons Development, oversaw the construction of humanity's expanding fleet from his position on Luna Base. Each new ship incorporated lessons learned from the war, improvements suggested by alien allies, and innovations that pushed the boundaries of what was possible. We're not building these ships to conquer anyone, he explained to a group of visiting council scientists. We're building them to make sure that what happened with the Devourers never happens again. The universe is full of threats we haven't discovered yet. We need to be ready. The indomitable will itself became more than just a warship. It became a symbol. It patrolled the outer systems, its massive bulk a reminder to both allies and potential enemies that Earth's children had taken their place among the stars not as conquerors, but as guardians of the principle that all intelligent life deserves its chance to reach for infinity. In the deepest archives of the Council Library, historians recorded the lessons learned when the human warship arrived. They wrote about complacency and preparation, about underestimation and determination, about the species that had surprised everyone by refusing to go quietly into extinction. The humans taught us, wrote Chief Historian Velnara in her final report, that survival is not a right to be assumed, but a responsibility to be earned. They showed us that peace without strength is merely a pause between disasters. Most importantly, they proved that sometimes the newest voices speak the oldest truths. Captain Hyejin, now Admiral Hyejin and commander of humanity's second warship, the unconquerable spirit, stood on her bridge and looked out at the stars. Around her, mixed crews of humans and aliens worked together, sharing knowledge and building friendships that would last for generations. The galaxy was rebuilding, but it was building something different than what had existed before, something stronger, something ready for whatever challenges the universe might offer. And in the dark spaces between the stars, other ancient threats stirred in their sleep, dreaming of galaxies to consume. But when they woke, they would find something they had never encountered before in millions of years of conquest. They would find a galaxy that was ready to fight back, led by a species that had learned long ago that giving up was not an option. The age of comfortable peace was over. The age of vigilant strength had begun, and at its heart stood humanity, no longer the newest members of the galactic community, but its most determined guardians. The universe was vast and full of dangers, but Earth's children were ready for whatever came next. The Altair system became a cemetery in less than 6 hours. 3 Council patrol fleets had positioned themselves at the system's outer edge, confident in their numbers and advanced technology. The ships gleamed in the light of Altair's twin stars, their shields shimmering with energy, their weapons charged and ready. Admiral Korvex commanded the lead formation from his flagship, a massive hegemony dreadnought called the Crimson Honor. All ships, maintain formation, Korvex ordered through the fleet communication system. These devourers may be large, but we have faced large enemies before. The devourer vanguard arrived exactly when human calculations had predicted. 12 enormous geometric structures dropped out of hyperspace with mechanical precision. They were not ships in any sense that living beings understood. They were perfect mathematical shapes that seemed to absorb light itself, moving through space like living geometry. Admiral Minho watched the battle from the indomitable Will's command center. His weathered face showed no emotion as he observed the Council forces engaging the enemy. Tactical Officer Jinwoo provided updates that sounded like funeral announcements. Hegemony Dreadnought Crimson Honor is engaging the lead harvester, Jinwoo reported, his voice steady despite what he was seeing. Their particle beam weapons are having no effect. The harvester is returning fire with some kind of molecular disintegration wave. The Crimson Honor, a kilometer-long warship that had been the pride of Council defense for 2 centuries, simply stopped existing. There was no explosion, no debris field, no dramatic death. One moment it was there, the next moment there was only empty space where 12,000 beings had lived and worked. Etherian formation is attempting to flank the enemy, Jinwoo continued. The harvesters are adapting to their tactics. They're rotating to engage all targets at once. The Etherian ships, graceful as dancers and fast as thought, tried to use their speed to confuse the enemy, but the Devourers moved with mechanical perfection, their weapons tracking multiple targets simultaneously. Within minutes, the entire Etherian squadron had been reduced to scattered atoms. Zephyrian atmospheric fighters are making attack runs, Jinwoo reported. Their plasma torpedoes are... The harvesters are absorbing the energy. They're using our weapons to make themselves stronger. Admiral Minho closed his eyes for a moment. He had tried to warn the Council about this. The Devourers did not just destroy their enemies. They learned from them, adapted to them, and became stronger with each encounter. Within 30 minutes, 3 entire fleets had been reduced to emergency beacons and scattered escape pods. The Devourers continued their advance toward Altair Prime, home to 12 billion beings, without even slowing down. Admiral, called Engineering Chief Kyung-soo from the ship's power core. All systems are operating at peak efficiency. The gravitational drives are stable, quantum armor is at full strength, and the reality disruptors are charged and ready to fire. Minho activated the ship-wide communication system, his voice reaching every human aboard the massive vessel. Attention, crew of the indomitable will. Today we do not fight for the council that dismissed our warnings or for the species that called us primitive. We fight for the principle that intelligence, any intelligence, deserves the chance to exist and grow. The human warship moved forward, its enormous bulk accelerating to speeds that should have been impossible. But humanity had spent 20 years learning to break the rules of physics, to bend reality to their will through pure determination and scientific innovation. Captain Hyejin coordinated the attack from her position on the bridge. Around her, hundreds of human crew members worked at stations that controlled weapons beyond alien comprehension. Target the lead harvester, she ordered. All weapon systems maximum power. Show them what happens when you threaten Earth's neighbors. The indomitable will opened fire. Reality itself rippled around the Devourer formation as humanity's weapons struck their targets. These were not the energy beams or particle streams that Council forces used. These were weapons that attacked the fundamental forces that held matter together, that twisted space and time, that reached into dimensions the Devourers had never encountered. The lead harvester, which had shrugged off everything the Council could throw at it, staggered under the assault. For the first time in millions of years of existence, a Devourer experienced something it had no programming to understand, damage it could not immediately repair. Direct hit on the primary target, Jinwoo reported, his voice filled with amazement. The harvester's geometric structure is destabilizing. It's trying to adapt, but our weapons are changing faster than it can compensate. The other Devourer harvesters turned toward the human ship with mechanical precision. Their weapons, which had effortlessly destroyed Council fleets, focused on the indomitable will. Disintegration beams that could unmake matter struck the human vessel's hull and bounced off harmlessly. Quantum armor holding, Chief Engineer Kyung-soo reported. Their weapons are operating on principles we planned for. Deflection systems are working perfectly. Communications Specialist Cheon was monitoring transmissions from across the galaxy. Sir, we're receiving emergency communications from every Council world. They're asking for help. Admiral Minho smiled grimly as the indomitable will continued its attack. Tell them we're already helping. The battle raged for hours. The Devourers tried every weapon in their vast arsenal, every tactic they had learned from consuming 1,000 civilizations. But humanity had done something no other species had ever managed. They had studied the Devourers for 20 years, learning their patterns, understanding their weaknesses, preparing for this exact moment. Second harvester is breaking apart, Jinwoo reported. Third harvester is attempting to retreat. No retreat, Minho ordered. We end this here. The indomitable will pressed forward, its weapons tearing through Devourer formations like a sword through paper. One by one, the geometric vessels that had seemed unstoppable were reduced to cosmic dust. But even as they won this battle, Admiral Minho knew it was just the beginning. The main Devourer fleet was still coming, still moving toward the galaxy's heart with mechanical determination. Sir, Captain Hyejin reported, we're detecting massive energy signatures from the outer rim. The main fleet is accelerating. They know we're here now. Minho nodded. The real war was about to begin. On monitoring stations across the galaxy, beings watched in stunned silence as humanity's warship completed the destruction of the advance force. For the first time in their mechanical existence, the Devourers had encountered something they couldn't simply consume and adapt to. They had encountered human determination. And that, Admiral Minho thought as he prepared for the next battle, was something no machine could ever truly understand. The emergency meeting of the Galactic Council happened faster than anyone thought possible. Representatives from across known space teleported to the great station, leaving their home worlds in panic. The massive chamber aboard Harmony's Edge had never seen so many frightened beings gathered in one place. Speaker Veltari called for order, but her voice was lost in the chaos. Dozens of species were arguing at once, their translation systems struggling to keep up with the noise. Fear filled the air like smoke, thick and choking. The human vessel has entered our territory without permission, declared High Admiral Corrin of the Hegemony Navy. His bug-like armor gleamed under the chamber's bright lights. "This is an attack that we cannot allow." Admiral Minho appeared as a hologram in the center of the chamber, his image slowly turning to face each group of delegates. Behind him, tactical displays showed the approaching Devourer fleet. Hundreds of geometric ships moved in perfect lines toward the galaxy's most populated systems. "Counselors," Minho began, his voice carrying the weight of absolute certainty, "you have about 72 hours before the Devourer advance force reaches the Altair system. Your combined fleet could not stop even one of their harvester ships." Dr. Yanhi stepped forward, carrying data tablets that contained 20 years of human research. She was humanity's expert on ancient civilizations, and she had spent her life studying the evidence that others had ignored. "We tried to warn you," she said, her voice steady despite the fear she saw in alien faces around her. The ruins on Kepler 7, the dead systems in the void reaches, the machine artifacts your survey teams kept calling unknown technology. All of it was evidence of previous Devourer attacks. Council Military Coordinator Zektar studied the tactical projections with his reptilian eyes. His species had survived for millions of years by being smart about warfare. What he saw on the displays made his blood run cold. "Even if these Devourers are real," he said slowly, "what makes you think one human ship can do what our entire fleet cannot?" The answer came from Captain Hijin, speaking from the Indomitable Will's bridge. Her voice was calm, but underneath it was something harder than steel. "Because we didn't spend 3 centuries growing comfortable with peace. While you debated and held meetings, we prepared for war." Behind closed doors, emergency meetings exploded across council space. The Etherian High Command met in their crystal spires, their usually calm voices rising in panic. Zephyrian fleet admirals gathered in their floating cities, studying battle plans that suddenly seemed useless. All of them reached the same terrible conclusion. If humanity was right, they were facing complete extinction. "Commander." Jiwan continued monitoring long-range communications from her post aboard. The distant eye. The signals she intercepted from the Devourers were unlike anything in Council databases. They were not the chaotic chatter of living beings or the ordered data streams of normal computers. "They're not communicating," she reported to Commander Deho. "They're synchronizing, like parts of a single enormous machine working together across impossible distances." In the council chamber, Speaker Veltari was losing control of the meeting. Beings from dozens of worlds were shouting demands, making threats and proposing impossible solutions. Some wanted to flee to other galaxies. Others wanted to hide in deep space. A few brave ones suggested fighting. "What do you want from us?" Veltari finally asked Minho's hologram. "Nothing," Minho replied. "We're not here to make demands or seek payment. We're here because when civilizations are threatened with extinction, someone has to stand up and fight." Admiral Talos, the four-armed warrior who commanded council defenses, pulled up fleet deployment charts. "Our ships are spread across 1,000 systems. It would take weeks to gather them into a single force." "You don't have weeks," Dr. Yanhi said firmly. "The Devourers move faster than your fastest ships. They adapt to your weapons quicker than you can fire them, and they never ever stop." High Admiral Koran slammed one of his armored fists on his desk. "How do we know you're not lying? How do we know this isn't some human trick to make us afraid?" The answer came from space itself. Long-range sensors throughout the galaxy suddenly detected massive energy signatures at the edge of explored space. The Devourer fleet was no longer hiding. It was announcing its presence with mechanical precision. "Because," said Admiral Minho quietly, "they're already here." On monitoring stations across the galaxy, beings watched in growing horror as the sensor readings came in. Ship after ship, all identical geometric shapes, all moving in perfect formation. The fleet was enormous beyond imagination, stretching across light years of space. Council analyst Sunho worked frantically at his computers, trying to count the approaching vessels. But the numbers kept growing. Hundreds became thousands. Thousands became tens of thousands. "How many?" someone asked. "Too many," Sunho whispered. In the council chamber, the arguing stopped. For the first time in 300 years, the galaxy's leaders faced a threat they could not negotiate with, could not reason with, and could not ignore. "What do you need from us?" Speaker Veltari asked Minho. "Stay out of our way," he replied, "and be ready to learn from what happens next." The Indomitable Will began moving toward the approaching threat, its massive hull accelerating to speeds that should have torn it apart. But humanity had learned to bend the laws of physics, to take what seemed impossible and make it real. Captain Hyejin coordinated the ship's approach from her command station. All weapon systems online. Quantum armor at maximum strength. Reality disruptors charged and ready. Chief Engineer Kyung-soo monitored the ship's incredible systems from deep in its armored core. Everything humanity had learned, everything they had built, everything they had sacrificed was focused into this one vessel. "Admiral," he reported, "we are ready." Admiral Minho activated the ship-wide communication system. "Crew of the Indomitable Will, today we do not fight for the council that ignored us or for the species that underestimated us. We fight for the idea that intelligence, any intelligence, deserves the chance to exist and grow." As the human warship moved toward the Devourer fleet, beings across the galaxy watched and waited. They had spent centuries believing that peace was permanent, that threats were manageable, that someone else would always solve the big problems. Now they were about to learn what happened when humanity decided that extinction was not acceptable. Space itself seemed to break when the Indomitable Will appeared. The massive human warship dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Centauri system, like a thunderclap. Every sensor within 50 light-years felt the shockwave that followed. The ship was enormous, stretching almost 8 kilometers from front to back. Its black hull was covered with weapons that looked like nothing anyone had ever seen before. On the council station, chaos erupted in the great meeting hall. Speaker Veltari, who was always calm and in control, felt her composure crack as emergency alarms screamed throughout the station. Beings from dozens of worlds started shouting at once, their translators struggling to keep up. "What is the meaning of this?" Veltari demanded, her musical voice rising to a shriek that no Etherian should ever make. Council Admiral Talos was using all 4 of his arms to work the control panels, trying to understand what his sensors were telling him. The readings made no sense. The ship was too big, too advanced, and it had appeared from nowhere. "Unknown vessel," Talos spoke into his communicator. "This is Council Defense Command. Tell us who you are right now or we will consider you an enemy." The answer came back immediately, but not in the universal trade language that everyone used. Instead it came in perfect Etherian, perfect Zephyrian, and 17 other council languages all at the same time. "This is Admiral Minho of the Human Defense Force, commanding the warship Indomitable Will. We are not here to conquer anyone. We are here because of the threat that you chose to ignore." In the council's intelligence section, analyst Sunho was working frantically at his computer, trying to understand how this was possible. According to every file they had, humans were barely capable of space travel. 50 years ago, they had been using primitive chemical rockets. "This cannot be real," Sunho muttered to himself, comparing the ship's design to everything in their databases. The human vessel used technology that the council had never seen. Its hull seemed to bend light around it. Its engines created gravity waves, and its weapons appeared to twist reality itself. Meanwhile, on Earth, President Yuna was finally telling her people the truth. Standing in the United Nations building, she spoke to every human on the planet through television. "Radio and internet, my fellow humans," she began, her voice steady despite the enormous weight of what she was saying. "For 23 years, our best minds have worked in secret. We have been preparing for a threat that our neighbors in space refused to believe was real. Today, the Indomitable Will shows not just how smart we are, but that humans will never accept extinction without a fight." Back in space, the council was trying to understand what they were seeing. The human ship was not just big, it was impossibly advanced. Council scientists had been studying space for thousands of years. How had a species that had barely learned to fly suddenly built something beyond their capabilities? On the Indomitable Will, Chief Engineer Kyung-soo monitored the ship's incredible power systems from deep inside its protected core. Every system was working perfectly. The gravitational drives that let them move faster than light, the quantum armor that protected them from weapons, and the reality-bending weapons that could tear apart anything they targeted. Humans had not just built a ship. They had built a miracle. "All systems green," Kyung-soo reported to the bridge. "We're ready for whatever comes next." Captain Hyejin coordinated with the ship's crew from her position at the command center. Around her, hundreds of humans worked at stations filled with technology that pushed the boundaries of what was possible. They had trained for this moment for years, knowing that someday they might be humanity's last hope. "Admiral," she reported to Minho. Long-range sensors are detecting multiple contacts approaching from the outer rim. The Devourer scout force is ahead of schedule. Admiral Minho studied the tactical displays with grim satisfaction. The Devourers were coming exactly as human scientists had predicted. Ancient machine intelligences that consumed entire civilizations, leaving nothing behind but empty space and scattered atoms. The Council had called these predictions impossible. They had said humans were too young to understand the galaxy's history. But humans had found the evidence in dead systems and ancient ruins. They had studied the patterns and learned to recognize the signs. "Open a channel to the Council," Minho ordered. Moments later, his image appeared in the Great Hall of the Council Station. Around him, tactical displays showed the approaching Devourer fleet. Hundreds of geometric ships moving in perfect formation toward the galaxy's heart. "Honored counselors," Minho said, his voice carrying absolute certainty. "You have approximately 72 hours before the Devourer advance force reaches the Altair system. Your combined fleets could not stop a single one of their harvester ships." Council Military Coordinator Zektar, whose reptilian species prided itself on strategic thinking, studied the projections with growing alarm. Even if these Devourers existed, what made one human ship think it could succeed where entire fleets would fail? "What makes you think one vessel can accomplish what our combined forces cannot?" Zektar asked. The answer came from Captain Hijin, speaking from the indomitable Will's Bridge. "Because we didn't spend 3 centuries getting comfortable with peace. While you held meetings and made speeches, we prepared for war. On the monitoring ship Distant Eye, Jiwan was intercepting strange signals from deep space. The Devourer communications were unlike anything in the Council databases. They were not biological like living beings or digital like normal computers. They were something else entirely. They're not talking to each other," she reported to Commander Deho. "They're synchronizing, like parts of one giant machine coordinating across impossible distances." Emergency meetings erupted across Council space. The Etherian High Command gathered in their crystal towers, while Zephyrian fleet admirals met in their floating cities. All reached the same frightening conclusion. If the human assessment was correct, they were facing the end of everything they had built. As the hours counted down, the galaxy's most powerful civilizations faced a humbling truth. The species they had dismissed as primitive newcomers might be their only hope for survival. The Devourers were coming. The Council was unprepared. But humanity had spent 20 years getting ready for this exact moment, and now the galaxy would learn what happened when humans refused to go quietly into extinction. The morning started like any other in the giant space station that floated around Nexus Prime. Speaker Veltari walked into the main hall where beings from different planets came to talk about trade and peace. Her skin was clear like glass, and she moved with the grace that all Etherians were known for. Today they would discuss boring things like mining rights and shipping routes. For 300 years the galaxy had been quiet. No wars, no big threats, just endless meetings about small problems. The Galactic Council had grown lazy and comfortable. They believed nothing could disturb their perfect peace. Far away from the station, on a small ship called the Distant Eye, Jiwan sat at her workstation. Her job was to watch the space around them and listen for any strange signals. She was one of the few humans working for the Council. Most aliens thought humans were too new and too simple to be important. The screen in front of her started showing something weird. Numbers and lines moved across it in ways she had never seen before. The signal was coming from the edge of the Kepler Nebula, a cloudy area of space where ships rarely went. "Commander Deho," she called out. "You need to see this." Deho walked over to her station. He was older than most humans in space, with lines on his face that showed he had seen many difficult things. Humans had only been part of the Council for 50 years, since a Zephyrian ship had found Earth by accident. Most aliens still saw humans as primitive and unimportant. "What is it?" Deho asked, looking at the strange patterns on her screen. "Something big is moving toward us," Jiwan said. Her fingers moved quickly over the controls, trying to understand what the sensors were telling her. "Really big. Bigger than anything in our files. How big?" Jiwan checked the numbers again. She could not believe what she was seeing. If this is right, it's much larger than a Council dreadnought. Maybe 3 times larger. Deho felt cold fear in his stomach. In 50 years of space travel, humans had learned that bigger usually meant more dangerous. But the Council had weapons and shields that had kept peace for centuries. What could be so large that it worried him? On Earth, Far from the council station, things were very different. Deep under the ground in Australia, Admiral Minho stood in a secret command center. Around him, hundreds of people worked at computers and control panels. Above them, hidden systems that had been sleeping for years were waking up. "Sir," Captain Heejin said from her position at the communication controls, "all council ships are following their normal routes. They don't know what's coming." Minho nodded but did not smile. He was thinking about the warnings that humans had tried to give to the council for 20 years. Warnings about something called the Devourers, ancient machines that ate entire star systems. The council had laughed at these warnings. They said humans were too young to understand the galaxy, but humans had not been sitting quietly. While the council held meetings, humans had been building, in secret places around Earth's solar system. The greatest project in human history was almost complete. The Indomitable Will was not just a ship. It was humanity's promise that they would not die quietly. "How long until launch?" Minho asked. 6 hours, sir," Heejin replied. "All systems are ready." Back on the distant eye, Jiwan was getting more worried. The big signal was moving fast, heading straight for the most populated systems in the galaxy. She had seen this pattern before in old reports that most people ignored. "Commander," she said to Deho, "I think we need to warn the council." "About what?" "We don't even know what it is." "I know. But remember those old human reports? The ones about machine intelligences that destroy everything they find?" Deho remembered. 3 years ago, a human scientist had presented evidence about ancient ruins and dead planets. She had shown patterns that suggested something had been destroying civilizations for millions of years. The council had politely ignored her. "Send the warning," Deho said quietly. On the council station, Speaker Veltari was in the middle of a speech about trade regulations when the emergency signal came through. Red lights flashed and loud alarms filled the great hall. Beings from dozens of different worlds started talking at once, their voices mixing into confused noise. "What is happening?" Veltari demanded. Council Admiral Talos, a warrior with 4 arms and thick armor, was already pulling up information on his screens. "Unknown contact approaching the outer systems," he reported. "Moving at high speed toward populated areas." Veltari felt her calm breaking. For 3 centuries, nothing had threatened the peace. Send ships to investigate. Find out what this is. But deep in space, the thing that was coming had no interest in talking. It had been traveling for thousands of years, sleeping between the stars. Now it was awake and it was hungry. The Devourers had found a new galaxy full of life to consume. On Earth, President Yuna was preparing to address the world. For 23 years, humanity's greatest secret had been kept hidden. Now it was time to tell the truth. "My fellow humans," she would say, "today we reveal what we have built in secret, not because we wanted war, but because we refused to accept that our species might simply disappear." In the hidden command center, Admiral Minho watched the final preparations. Chief Engineer Kyung-soo reported that all systems were working perfectly. The ship that humans had built was like nothing the galaxy had ever seen. It used new kinds of power and weapons that bent the rules of science. "Sir," Heejin said, "we're ready to launch." Minho looked at the screen showing the approaching threat. The council still did not understand what was coming. Their comfortable peace had made them blind to danger. But humans remembered what it meant to fight for survival. "Launch the Indomitable Will," he ordered. In space, sensors across the galaxy would soon detect the most powerful warship ever built by human hands. The galaxy was about to learn that the species they had ignored was not as helpless as they thought. The Devourers were coming. But humanity was ready,